diving into a pretty thorny issue, the Canada-U.S. tariff dispute. And we have to start with Kevin O'Leary, the Canadian businessman. He certainly didn't mince words, called the whole thing a stupid waste of time.
Yeah, quite blunt.
So our goal here is to unpack that, unpack O'Leary's arguments, look at the economic fallout for businesses, for consumers, based on the insights you've shared.
Right. And it's a bold statement he makes. His core critique is pretty stark. He just says flat out, tariffs don't work. They never have.
Never have. Wow.
Yeah. And from his viewpoint, they just increase costs, reduce competitiveness, and damage small businesses. He sees the whole strategy as, well, fundamentally flawed.
That's a really strong take. So just to set the scene for you listening, the root of this conflict, it really comes down to growing tensions over trade rules, regulations, and that's led both Canada and the U.S. to slap on these retaliatory tariffs, basically taxes on imports meant to, hit back.
It's a tit-for-tat situation we've seen before, unfortunately.
Yeah, but with real consequences.
And that's what O'Leary flags, right? He connects it to this wider market uncertainty. He's warning that if this keeps escalating, it could really hurt long-standing trade ties.
Undermine relationships.
Exactly. And slow down the economic recovery. He points specifically to sectors like automotive, agriculture, manufacturing, key areas for both economies.
And it's not just him saying this, right?
No, not at all. What's interesting is how many economists actually, echo these concerns. The general feeling is often that tariffs, especially between such deeply linked economies, Canada and the U.S.
Yeah, so integrated.
Right. They tend to serve political aims more than they actually help economic growth. They often create what economists call deadweight loss.
Deadweight loss. Explain that a bit.
It's basically inefficiency.
Yeah.
The total cost to society, higher prices for consumers, lost business for efficient producers, it outweighs any benefit, like, say, increased government revenue or temporary protection for one specific industry.
Okay, I get it. So when O'Leary says tariffs don't work, that's the economic argument underneath. Why do they fail so consistently in his view?
Well, the basic idea is tariffs are just taxes on imports. So think about it. A business needs, say, steel from the other country.
Right.
Suddenly there's a tariff. Their costs go up. So they either have to absorb that cost, meaning lower profits, maybe fewer investment.
Or pass it on.
Or pass it on to consumers, meaning higher prices for, cars or washing machines or whatever uses that steel.
And the competitiveness angle.
Well, if that Canadian product now has more expensive components because of tariffs, it just can't compete as well against products from, say, Europe or Asia that don't face those same input costs.
Right, so demand might drop.
Demand drops, maybe innovation slows down, maybe jobs are even lost if companies can't stay competitive globally.
And you mentioned small businesses specifically getting hit hard. Why them in particular?
Yeah, they often feel more acutely. Big multinational companies, they might have complex supply chains.
More options.
Deeper pockets. Maybe they can even shift production somewhere else to get around the tariff.
But a small company.
A small company, much tougher. They're usually less diversified, running on really thin margins. They might depend heavily on one specific imported part or material.
So a sudden tariff could be devastating.
Absolutely. It could wipe out their entire profit margin overnight. Makes it impossible to compete unless they jack up prices, which could lose them their customers. We've definitely seen small manufacturers struggle, sometimes even close, because a key material suddenly became unaffordable.
So the intention might be protection, but the reality, according to O'Leary and these economists, is quite different. Is there history to back this up, this idea that tariffs don't work?
Oh, definitely. Well, there are some very specific, limited arguments, like maybe temporary protection for a brand new infant industry or for genuine national security.
Exceptions.
Right. But history is kind of littered with examples where broad tariffs just backfired spectacularly. The classic one everyone points to is Smoot-Hawley back in the 1930s.
The Great Depression era.
Exactly. It was meant to protect U.S. farms and businesses, but is widely seen as making the Depression worse because it triggered this global trade war. Everyone put up barriers.
Commerce just seized up.
Pretty much. So O'Leary's claim, never have, might be a bit strong.
A touch hyperbolic, maybe?
Perhaps. But definitely taps into that historical pattern.
Yeah.
Tariffs often lead to retaliation, trade shrinking, and economic pain, not stable growth.
That really paints a picture. So we've got this strong economic argument against tariffs from O'Leary and others. the real damage they seem to cause. And yet, the political leaders often seem stuck, divided on the issue. While you have businesses, actual companies on both sides, calling for things to cool down, for clearer rules. It's a real disconnect.
It absolutely is. And that leaves us with a really important question for you, the listener, to think about. Given these economic impacts we've talked about, the higher costs, the hit to competitiveness, the damage especially to smaller businesses, and O'Leary's very direct claim that tariffs just plain don't work, what is really at stake here for businesses, for you as a consumer in these kinds of international trade fights? Is it, like O'Leary says, ultimately just a stupid waste of time with consequences that go way beyond the political headlines? Something to consider.